After 500 years in space, we uncovered sinister secrets of a cursed planet haunting humanity. The Johnson family didn't know it yet, but they had just unwittingly stepped into a haunting puzzle filled with shadowy secrets. Mark Johnson's fingers hovered above his keyboard, the soft hum of his computer blending with tranquil winds outside their new home. Sarah, eyes bright with hope, watched their children, Ethan and Lily, play in the yard. They believed this small town was a sanctuary, a fresh start where nightmares of the past would fade. Little did they know, pure terror was lurking just outside their cozy walls. That evening, an unsettling chill replaced the gentle summer warmth. As dusk descended, flickering shadows danced just out of view, darting too quickly for Sarah to grasp. She brushed it off as her imagination, laughter echoing from the nearby diner where wary townsfolk watched with glazed eyes. "Just a small-town welcome," she murmured uneasily, but something felt distinctly off. When Mrs. Granger, their seemingly sweet elderly neighbor, stared through her wild silver hair with unsettling intensity, a shiver raced down Sarah's spine. Why was she always watching? Later that night, while Mark buried himself in code, Sarah felt an instinctive tremor. "Ethan! Lily!" she yelled, her voice edged with anxiety as she found her children in the backyard, whispering together, their faces illuminated by shards of moonlight like ghosts. "What are you doing?" But they giggled back, their voices echoing in strange, creepy phrases. "Mommy, we have friends." Their laughter dripped with unease, a sound that ricocheted off the walls of her heart. In their quest to unravel the eerie atmosphere, the couple visited the local library, seeking answers cloaked in dusty leather-bound tomes and hidden fears. They uncovered diaries of the town's founders, flinging open the doors to dark realities. Entries spoke of mysterious lights that bathed the night sky, people who vanished without a trace, and crumbling rituals meant to summon a dreadful force tied to a distant planet. A creeping dread filled Mark and Sarah as they read on, realizing their children were speaking in a language connected to this heart-stopping lore. "Just keep your kids close," the sheriff had said, dismissing their fears with a wave of his hand. The local smiles were sickly sweet, hiding the malicious undertones that made the air heavy. As the inhabitants continued to murmur among themselves, the Johnsons exchanged quick glances, filled with concern that swelled like a tide. Were they paranoid? Or had they simply inherited the burdens of a town steeped in gruesome history? The thrill of escape lingered on the edges of their minds. But every dawn brought new horrors. One afternoon, Mark stumbled upon a carving within a tree, a symbol twisted and distorted, echoing the ominous sketches from his children's cryptic tales. "Listen to us!" screamed Lily and Ethan, eyes wide with feverish excitement. "They tell us things." The house felt like a trap. Whispers echoed under closed doors. With every second the tension rose, metamorphosing the parochial charm of the town into a suffocating darkness. Such relatable warmth twisted into vile hospitality. Sarah clenched her hands, staring out into the unfathomable gardens teeming with secrets. As she pieced together the puzzle, the reality displayed a monster lurking in the shadows, and the price for peace grew increasingly steep. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the last rays of the sun disappeared, shadows crawled across their yard, hanging heavily like a noose. The children's whimpers grew louder, pleading for their parents to listen to friends who weren't there. Mark's heart raced, pounding like a drum of impending doom. The darkness was creeping in, and the question hung heavily in the air: would the Johnsons make it out alive, or would they become another chilling chapter in the town's cursed history? Sarah's breath quickened as she guided her children back into the house. The moonlight cast a sickly glow, contouring their faces in a way that made her heart ache. The moment she closed the door, the air thickened, as if the house itself was holding its breath. "What friends?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, swallowing the panic clawing at her throat. "We told you, Mommy. The ones by the tree." Ethan clutched Lily's hand, squeezing it like a lifeline. "They said they're coming for us." Mark glanced up from his desk, shadows under his eyes deepening. "That's enough, there's nothing out there." But he couldn't shake the unease that settled like a weight on his chest. "It's just your imagination." Yet the kids weren't convinced. They huddled closer, whispering in murmurs only they could understand. Words woven with fear emerged in the dim light. "The lights, the circle they want to play." A sudden knock rattled the front door. The sound echoed through the silence, bringing all four Johnsons to a standstill. Sarah's heart raced. Who could that be at this hour? "Maybe it's the sheriff?" Mark suggested, though doubt twisted his expression. "Mom," Lily's voice trembled, "he want help." The back door creaked. An icy gust swept through the house, flicking the lights into intermittent flashes as if a storm brewed just outside. "Stay here," Mark said, cautious but firm. He moved closer to the door, the darkness pressing against him like a living thing. Another knock, a frantic, desperate rapping. Mark felt a chill swim down his spine. He grasped the doorknob, hesitating. "Who's there? Help me." A voice, thin, frail, crackled through the air like static. It was one he recognized, but the more he listened, the more it twisted into something inhuman. Suddenly, the kids screamed, their little bodies tensing, eyes wide as saucers. "No! Don't open it!" But the voice grew louder, wrenching Mark's resolve. He swung open the door. The sight left him disoriented. Mrs. Granger stood there, her silver hair wild, eyes darting like a trapped animal. But her face, it twisted into an expression that made the hairs on his neck stand tall. "They're here. They're coming." "Who?" Sarah shouted, panic flooding her senses. "What are you talking about?" "The ones in the woods." She breathed, her voice thick with terror. "I thought they'd forgotten, but they've awakened. You must take the children, run." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. The earth seemed to groan, pulling the shadows from the corners of their yard into a suffocating whirl. The lights flickered more violently now, and Mark felt the pull to retreat. He started to close the door when a blinding flash erupted from the woods, illuminating the night sky. "Mommy! Daddy!" Ethan and Lily bolted towards the window, and just like that, their giggles were transformed into terrified shrieks. "They're there! They're watching us!" Mark dashed to join them, heart pounding, breath hot like fire. Outside, a kaleidoscope of lights danced through the trees, eerily beautiful yet utterly malevolent. Shapes shifted wildly amidst the brilliance, creating silhouettes that reached hungrily towards them. "Get away from the window!" Sarah cried, but it was too late. A swirl of shadow slipped into the house, fierce and unyielding, wrapping around the children's legs. Each breath tasted of metal, each heartbeat felt like a countdown. "What do we do?" Mark yelled, his voice cracking, and then, an utter silence fell. The children's cries evaporated into the void, leaving only a bone-chilling whisper. "Join us." Was it a plea or a demand? Mark's hands trembled, cold sweat dripping down his brow. He looked into Sarah's eyes, desperation mirrored. But the question loomed larger than ever. What price would they need to pay to save their family from the dark forces that craved their souls? As the children shivered, he knew they could no longer be just passive witnesses to the unfolding horror. "We have to get out of here!" Mark shouted. But before he could gather them, the lights outside intensified, almost beckoning. Were they really leaving? Or were they lured deeper into the web of shadows? In that moment, the door slammed shut behind them. Panic surged as they realized there might be no escape. What would they find on the other side of the door? Would the family unravel together, or would they fracture under the weight of the town's grim embrace? The house felt alive, pulsing with a sinister energy that snaked into Mark's bones. Panic coursed through him, and his instincts screamed at him to flee. Yet there was nowhere to run. Darkness enveloped them like a shroud, swallowing their voices, their hope. "Mommy, I'm scared." Lily hid her face against Sarah's leg, her small body trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. Ethan stared wide-eyed at the shadow pooling in the corners of the room, its presence a reminder of the voices whispering outside. "Listen to me, kids," Mark said, forcing authority into his voice. "We're going to stick together. We're not letting them in." But Sarah felt a creeping dread, her heart sank at how futile their words felt against the swelling terror. "Mommy, let us go to the basement," Ethan suggested, clutching Lily tighter. "It'll be safer there." In the silence that followed, the world held its breath. Mark looked toward the basement door, but the thought of descending into the dark, damp confines only heightened his anxiety. The pounding of his heart grew louder as if it echoed the deep, resonant thud of something lurking beneath the surface. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air, thrumming like a distant alarm. The lights flickered again, and the whispers returned. A cacophony of voices, layered with pain and longing, seeped through the walls. "Join us, come play, what do they want?" Sarah breathed, wrapping her arms around her children as if she could shield them from the unseen horror, but the children were not the only ones captivated by the beckoning cries. Mark found himself drawn towards the door, the handle cool and inviting beneath his palm. He shook his head violently, shaking loose the illusion of safety. "This is a trick," he shouted, his voice almost lost in the din. "They want to confuse us." "Mommy." Ethan's small voice pierced through Mark's resolve. "They know us, they know our names." A pounding erupted at the door, louder this time. "Help, let us in." The voice morphed, transforming from one tone into another, engulfing them in a symphony of desperation and dark desires. It was impossible to tell who was outside anymore, or what they truly were. "Mark." Sarah's voice was tight, fear clawing at her throat. "We can't let them confuse us. We can't give in." But Mark found himself backing up, his mind swirling with dread as shadows slithered closer, slipping beneath the door and coiling around his feet. Dim, glowing eyes flickered in the darkness, summoning fragments of lost souls who sought to drag them into an eternity of horror. Suddenly, an unholy scream shattered the moment. It rose from the basement, a sound raw and primal, reverberating through Mark's bones. He recoiled, horror cracking through his skin, leaving him gasping for air. "What was that?" Lily whimpered, tightening her grip on her mother. Ethan turned sharply towards the basement door. "We have to find out," he insisted, resolve igniting momentarily in his eyes. "No." Sarah's shout conveyed a primal instinct, arms wide like a shield to protect her children. "Mark, we need to leave." But then, they both turned back to the front door as it creaked open, drawn by a force stronger than fear itself. The room flooded with silvery light, spilling from the doorframe where shadowy figures began to coalesce. Ethereal forms, their faces stretched in agony, whispering dark promises. Mark felt the air thicken around them, sense of decay and longing pulling him closer. "Join us, come play," their chant reverberated, wrapping around him like a noose. "Run!" Mark shouted, decisive. He grabbed Ethan's arm, and Sarah hoisted Lily into her arms. Shoving past the shadows, they barreled towards the back door, intent on escape, but what welcomed them on the other side wasn't the safety of their yard. Instead, an endless void stared back, swirling with the same malevolence that engulfed their home. As the whispers grew louder, Mark felt time freeze. This was a choice. He could take his family into darkness or face the horrors that lurked within. "Mommy, they're behind us!" Ethan screamed, panic electrifying. The air. Would they run into the unknown, or stand their ground against the shadows beckoning them? A blinding flash erupted from the woods, illuminating the vacant yard as the decision loomed, heavy and inevitable. The moment hung, suspended in fear. Mark's heart raced as if taunting him with its frantic drum. A chasm opened where only their yard used to be, a whirlpool of gloom pulling at their resolve, whispering promises that made no sense. "Where do we go?" Sarah's voice wavered. She looked at the creeping shadows, then at the void. Every instinct screamed at her to run. They were trapped, and the walls of their home twisted like an unseen force grating against their sanity. "Back inside!" Mark shouted, adrenaline propelling him to action as he turned on his heels. He needed to act, to fight the encroaching terror, but every heartbeat felt heavy with dread. He yanked open the back door and shoved the family in, ushering them into the black depths of their house once again. They stumbled back into the living room where the darkness thickened, wrapping around them like a smothering blanket. Shadows shifted and slinked along the walls, taunting them with disembodied laughter that scraped against Mark's mind. His fingers brushed against the flickering light switch, desperation driving him to flip it. The bulb sputtered but remained dim, unable to fend off the encroaching dark. "Why can't we just leave?" Sarah murmured, her eyes darting toward the claustrophobic corners, where the shadows seemed to breathe. "We'll find a way. We have to." Mark gritted his teeth. The children huddled close, their small faces twitched with fear. Ethan, trembling, gazed at the basement door. That scream came from down there. "No!" Sarah snapped. "We can't go down there. It's too dangerous." But Mark felt a draw toward that door. What if there were answers down there? What if the fear was just a trick? A fleeting moment of hope lodged itself in his throat. "Maybe we can find something to help us. Something to get us out." "Mommy, I'm scared," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising pitch of fear swirling in the room. Mark's instinct screamed wrong, but his will to protect his family urged him on. He took a deep breath, steeling himself against the icy grip of dread. "I'll go first." "What?" Ethan's voice cracked at the suggestion. "No. We all go together. The shadows, they want to separate us." Sarah chimed in, panic lacing her words. "You can't go alone." They debated in frantic whispers, each voice thin with fear, but the shadows thickened, tightening their invisible grasp. Time felt warped, simultaneously suspended and fleeting, as their world continued to spiral into chaos. Suddenly, the whispers outside morphed into a full-blown wail, a haunting crescendo that drowned out their thoughts. A bead of cold sweat rolled down Mark's back. The children pressed against Sarah, their small bodies shaking like leaves in a storm. A flash of movement caught his eye. Shadows darted across the windows like fleeting phantoms. What did they want? Why did they linger? The questions were too much, suffocating him. "Okay. On the count of 3, we go together," Mark finally declared, his voice rising above the chaos. 1, 2. Then a loud crack reverberated, echoing through the house like a gunshot, causing them all to jump. The front door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the windows. The shadows outside shifted restlessly, pulsating with hunger. 3. Mark shouted, as fear electrified the air around them. They charged towards the basement door, moving as one. Just then, a figure slipped down the hallway, its face twisted in torment, lips curling into a grotesque grin. The apparition shimmered in the half-light, eyes glimmering with an otherworldly glare. "Your turn to play," it whispered, voice dripping with malice. "Run!" Mark screamed, but a paralyzing fear gripped them. The decision they had sought was gone now. They were playing a game they never understood. As they rushed for the basement, Mark's only thought was whether they would emerge from the void or become part of it forever. When they reached the door, it swung open on its own, revealing a descending staircase that seemed to stretch into infinity. Shadows writhed at the edge, beckoning them forward. "Do we go down?" Sarah's voice trembled, echoing the uncertainty. Mark hesitated, grappling with whether to dive deep into the unknown or to confront the nightmare behind them. He glanced back at the tortured figure in the hallway, its grin deepening as if to say there was no escape. what awaited them in the abyss below? Could the basement hold their salvation, or would it seal their fate? With a synchronized breath, they all stepped into the basement, the cold air hitting them like a wall. The door creaked ominously behind them, slamming shut as it sealed them in darkness. A shudder rippled through Mark, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, but the pull of the shadows urged him onward. "Stay close," he whispered, barely above a breath. The flickering light from his phone illuminated damp, peeling walls, shadows shifting just out of sight, always out of reach, taunting, waiting. "Daddy, I don't like it down here." Lily's voice trembled, oscillating between tears and sheer panic. "I know," Mark replied, forcing steadiness into his voice. "But we'll find a way out. Together." The stairs creaked underfoot, a haunting melody that resonated through the blackness. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the very house was trying to pull them back. Mark gripped the rail, sweat beading on his brow as he scanned the space. The uneven ground seemed to warp, the shadows swirling thickly around them. He pulled his family closer. "Let us keep moving." They entered a dimly lit room, the flickering light revealing piles of forgotten junk, old furniture, rotting boxes, and something darker lurking in the corners. A cold draft blew through, its icy fingers grazing against their skin, sending shivers down their spines. The air felt electric, charged with the promises of the unseen. "Look," Ethan pointed to an old trunk, its leather cracked and brittle. "What's inside?" "Maybe there's something we can use," Mark suggested, kneeling down cautiously. The trunk sat there, a relic of a time long forgotten, its lock rusted but intact. A sense of urgency pressed against him, a nagging thought that time was slipping away. "No, don't." Sarah's voice shot through the air, but curiosity pulled Mark's hands toward it. What if it held the answers they sought? With a sharp pull, the lock snapped, and the lid creaked open, releasing a wave of musty air laced with something foul. Inside, objects began to shudder and clamor, remnants of the past rattling against one another, old toys, trinkets, and a faded diary. Mark fished out the diary, its pages yellowed with age. He flipped it open. Unrecognizable handwriting scrawled across the pages, spilling secrets of those who had come before. This was written by someone who lived here," he murmured, eyebrows knitting together as he struggled to interpret the messy ink trails. "Are you serious?" Sarah asked, fear mingling with skepticism. "What is it saying?" "It talks about darkness. How it never truly leaves. That something waits below it, consumes the living." Mark's heart sank as he read further, the words pulling him into a chilling grip. The very air around them thickened, and the deep echoes of their own breathing became foreboding. Suddenly, a distant sound echoed, a whimpering like that of a child, only their children were right there. The noise chipped at Mark's composure, clawing at his sanity. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, eyes darting towards the narrow hallway leading deeper into the abyss. "It's coming from inside the house," Sarah hissed, pressing her back against the wall, eyes wide with terror. "What have we done?" "There's something down here," Ethan spoke, voice barely above a whisper, his fear palpable. The shadows coiled tighter around them, spinning a web of panic. Mark's heart thudded louder, echoing in the silence. "We have to go back," Lily cried, pulling at her mother's leg. "I want to go home." But the thick tendrils of dread settled heavier, making it harder to move. The darkness held them captive, and Mark felt the weight of it settling in like a stone in his stomach. He gripped the trunk, refusing to be swallowed whole. A sudden high-pitched scream pierced through, freezing them all in place. It was a sound of pure agony, a cry begging for help. It cut through their fear, merging with their desperate wish to escape. "Mark, what do we do?" Sarah's voice quivered, her eyes darting frantically. "Stay together," he commanded, maintaining an ounce of authority. "We can't let it separate us." But, as if in reply, the shadows swirled rapidly, exposing figures that floated just beyond the edge of the light. Their twisted forms writhed silently, mouths opening wide in perfect synchronization promising secrets and pain. Mark turned back to the stairs, the only escape route. But the narrow space shifted as a cold wave washed over them, a tangible presence pushing them forward, pulling them into the heart of their own nightmares. "Whatever happens, stay close," he shouted as the basement seemed to erupt, shadows engulfing their light. With every heartbeat, the darkness roared, demanding them to descend into its depths. Was there still a way out? Or were they fated to join the endless screams echoing in the dark? They took one last collective breath, then plunged deeper into the abyss, the walls whispering forgotten tales as their fate hung in the air like a noose waiting to snap. And just before the darkness consumed them entirely, they heard a chilling voice, resonating through the void, promising, "You will never escape what you have unleashed." The basement swallowed them whole, dragging them deeper into its merciless grip. Mark felt an insatiable chill creeping under his skin, like fingers probing his very soul. He held his breath, every fiber of his being torn between the need to flee and an inexplicable urge to uncover the source of that haunting scream. "Mark, keep moving," Sarah urged, her voice quivering as the shadows twisted around them. They huddled close, the faint beam of Mark's phone barely penetrating the thick, suffocating darkness. Lily clutched her father's pant leg, her small fingers trembling. "Daddy, I'm scared," she whimpered, tears glistening in her wide eyes. "Me too." "Just hold on tight," he managed to say, swallowing hard against the knot of fear swirling in his throat. Ethan edged closer, scanning their surroundings. What if we find a way out?" His voice barely masked the terror beneath. "There has to be something here." And then he saw it, a faint glimmer peeking through the shadows, a door half ajar at the far end of the room, its outline barely discernible. The flickering light danced on cold metal, a rusty doorknob shrouded in darkness. "Over there." Ethan pointed, voice rising with newfound hope. "Let us go." "Wait!" Mark shouted, but it was too late. Driven by desperation, Ethan swept toward the door, the noise of his footsteps a deafening echo in the stillness. Sarah followed closely, dragging Lily along, while Mark hesitated, caught between the fear of the unknown and the gnawing instinct to protect his family. As they approached, the darkness deepened, swallowing more light, and the air thickened, becoming almost suffocating. "Open it," Sarah urged, barely containing her dread. With a shaking hand, Ethan grasped the doorknob, forcing it open. An unbearable scream erupted from the other side, causing everyone to step back, breath hitching in their throats. The door swung wide, revealing a staircase winding downward into a pit of absolute blackness. Mark's heart pounded a frantic rhythm. "We can't go further down," he said, instinctively taking a step back, but he felt the pressure of the shadows pushing him closer, forcing his family to linger on the edge of that abyss. "Do you hear it?" Lily cried, pointing. "Someone's down there." It was a chorus, multiple voices now, sharp with pain and desperation, echoing in the confined space, plea after plea that clawed at Mark's sanity. He locked eyes with Sarah. "What do we do?" "Maybe it's a trick, we should go back," she gasped, panic gripping her voice, but the whispering voices transformed into soft weeping, fragile and broken. The hairs on the back of Mark's neck stood on end. "No, we can't just leave them," he muttered. He stepped closer to the decaying staircase, bathed wholly in shadows, void of any light. Suddenly, the whispers turned sinister, rising like wailing banshees. The walls throbbed as if the very house was alive, pulsating with dark energy, drawing them further into its haunting abyss. "Daddy!" Lily screamed, clenching her fists. Fear twisted her small face into a mask of terror. "Let us go!" Mark shouted, and they turned to run, but the shadows surged, blocking their escape. The door slammed shut with a thunderous clap, trapping them in this claustrophobic nightmare where the air felt charged with an otherworldly presence. Mark jerked away from the door, despair washing over him. He spun back, terror gripping him as he looked to the staircase. The cries grew louder, as though they were now inside their heads, resonating with a sickening clarity. A cold sweat slicked Mark's brow as he struggled with the decision. We could help. We could. Mark, stop. Sarah pleaded, her eyes wide with terror, pleading for reason. Stop it. We need to get out. But as if in response, the shadows lunged forward, sprawling like a living entity. Mark stumbled back, and in that heartbeat, the whispers melded into a single name, anguished yet familiar. Mark, it echoed around them as if the house itself was calling him, deeply personal and impossibly alluring. He hesitated, terror and intrigue colliding within him. Get ready to run, he shouted, realizing they were far too deep. But it was already too late. The whispers intensified, twisting around them like chains, binding them to the spot. And just as Mark tried to yank his family away, the shadows shaped themselves into a single, grotesque figure. Do you dare to defy your destiny? The voice slithered like ice down Mark's spine, and in that moment, the suffocating dread morphed into something else, something primal. Panic gripped them as the figure loomed closer, a sinister silhouette against the swallow of blackness. Mark, it called again, with one last desperate glance at his family. Mark felt the shadows closing in, crashing over them, beginning to erase their presence in the world. In that moment, he made a choice, mustering all his strength to fight against the encroaching darkness. He yelled, "We'll never accept you." But whether it was enough would soon become evident as the darkness responded, crashing down like a tidal wave, and in the depths of despair, a fractured question lingered: would they unravel the curses of the past or be claimed as its latest victims? The darkness shuddered, a living thing that pulsated with malice and intent. Mark's shout echoed futilely into the abyss, swallowed by the cries that surged in response. Shadows curled around them like tendrils, wrapping tighter as if testing the strength of their will. "Daddy!" Lily cried, clinging to him in a grip that felt both desperate and resigned. Time stretched, each moment an eternity as Mark searched for a way to break free. He glanced at Sarah. Her face was ghostly pale, eyes wide and glistening with tears. "Mark, don't let it take us." Her voice cracked like glass. The figure loomed closer, its features becoming grotesquely clear. A pale face, mouth twisted into a cruel smile, and eyes that drained the very light from the air. Then came the whispers, a raucous symphony of anguished souls. They filled Mark's mind with flashes of images, desperation, betrayal, and a darkness that thrived on suffering. Those were no mere shadows, they were the remnants of lives lost to this cursed space. "Get away from us!" Ethan shouted, stepping in front of Sarah and Lily. His fists were clenched, but Mark could see the tremor in his hands. The figure paused, as if contemplating the challenge posed by the boy's fear. With sickening clarity, the entity spoke again, a voice that seemed to echo from every shadow. "You think strength will save you from what you cannot understand? All who enter will repay their debt." Mark hissed, rage surging. "What do you want from us?" The figure's gaze pierced right through him. "Your choices. Each scream is a reminder each soul must repay." Mark felt his heart race, despair flooding in. The weight of their situation bore down. What had this house claimed before them? What nightmares were buried within its walls? An idea sparked: if this malevolent force fed on souls, then perhaps they could break its hold through sheer defiance. "We're not afraid of you," Mark shouted, a challenge imbued with a desperate hope. "Bravery in the face of inevitability is a child's game," the figure taunted, its voice dripping with contempt. "What you face is a fate woven long before your time." And then came a flicker of light, a flicker that dared to shine against the consuming void. A fleeting glow surged from behind the figure, an old lantern perched on a ledge that had been obscured in the shadows. "Over there!" Ethan yelled, hope surging as he pointed. "We can use it." Mark's instincts kicked in, and without thinking, he charged toward the lantern. The entity recoiled, the whispers crescendoing into a chaotic shriek, angered by the disturbance. "Run!" Sarah shouted, and they lunged together, blasting through the darkness, each passing second feeling like an eternity. Mark managed to grab the lantern, its light flared to life, and for a heartbeat, it illuminated the grotesque face of the looming figure, freezing it in time. The light pushed back the shadows, forcing the screams to retreat, like animals fleeing from an encroaching fire, but the shadows dashed back, weaving through the cracks in the walls, ready to engulf them once more. "It's not over." The figure roared, its face contorting with rage. Mark switched the lantern toward the staircase, illuminating the path that seemed to twist in endless darkness. "Up we go!" he shouted. As they raced toward the stairs, the ground quivered beneath them, the walls groaning with a ferocity that sent terror through every fiber of their beings. They stumbled, regaining their footing as the air grew thick with shrieks, the entity realizing its grip was slipping. "Mark!" the figure hissed, its threat trailing behind them like a curse. They reached the first step, but the shadows were relentless, clawing up from the edges like writhing serpents, eager to drag them back into the depths. "Don't look back!" Mark yelled, his own fear crashing into resolve, but the cries echoed in Mark's head, a sickening reminder of what lay beyond and what had been lost. What price would they pay for freedom? As they reached the top step, the whispers rose again, this time layering with confusion a trapped soul reaching out. "Help us!" Mark's heart ached. Who were the lost? What had they once been that connected them to this nightmare? With a rending crash, the figure lunged, a final desperate grasp. "Go!" he yelled, forcing Ethan and his family through the closing trap, determined not to leave them behind. As the door loomed ahead, Mark felt a heartbeat of dread, knowing the past always clung close. Just as they passed through, the darkness surged once more, howls of rage crashing against their backs. The door slammed shut behind them with a finality that echoed the last vestiges of dread, leaving them in breathless silence. But what awaited them on the other side wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of another terrible revelation, waiting to strike. What had they unleashed in their desperate flight? The cold air bit at their skin as they stumbled into the dimly lit hallway, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness they had just fled. The lantern flickered uncertainly in Mark's hand, its feeble light casting elongated, jagged shadows that danced menacingly along the cracked walls. "Are we safe?" Lily's voice trembled, her small body shaking against him. Mark looked down into her wide, fearful eyes. "We're okay for now." But his heart sank with every word. The entity's malevolent whispers still echoed in his mind, claws of dread tightening around his throat. "Where do we go?" Ethan asked urgently, scanning the hallway. The walls bore witness to something ancient, the layers of peeling paint revealing unsettling patterns that seemed to twist and writhe under the lantern's glow. "We need to find a way out," Sarah said, her voice steadier than Mark felt. She placed a hand on the wall, feeling the texture of the mottled surface. "It has to end somewhere, right?" Mark moved forward, his instincts screaming at him to keep going. Each creaking floorboard beneath their feet sent chills racing down his spine. The house, the heart of the darkness, still throbbed, pulsing with a sinister rhythm that felt alive. Suddenly, the air shifted. A low hum vibrated through the walls, growing louder and more discordant. Mark froze, the lantern's light flickering wildly, and then he heard it, a distant sob, a moan, the unmistakable sound of despair. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, eyes darting to Sarah and Ethan for confirmation. "I did." Sarah's voice trailed off, fear carved into her features. They moved cautiously down the hallway, following the sound, legs heavy with apprehension. The lantern illuminated doors that seemed to guard secrets long buried, some slightly ajar, others tightly shut as if clamoring to keep whatever lurked inside at bay. Ethan hesitated before a door that creaked ominously on its hinges. What if it's another trap? Mark felt the pull of curiosity and dread, a magnetic force drawing him toward the unknown. "We have to know," he said, the urge overwhelming his fear. As he pushed the door open, it protested with a long, drawn-out groan. The room beyond was shrouded in shadows, but the cries grew clearer, more urgent. He stepped inside, the light from the lantern revealing dusty furniture and broken mirrors that reflected fragmented images, a twisted collage of their fears. I in the corner, a figure hunched over, obscured by darkness. Mark's heart raced as he approached, the whispers in the shadows intensifying. But as he drew closer, he saw the face, a pale, sunken visage reminiscent of the entity they had escaped. "Help me," it rasped, eyes wide with terror. "I am trapped like you." "Who are you?" Mark stammered, caught in the gaze of the creature before him. "What do you want?" "Not want, need. To break the curse. To escape." The figure's wasted hands reached out, fingers trembling. Mark recoiled, glancing at Sarah and Ethan. "I don't trust this, it could be another trick." But the figure continued, its voice a haunting melody that pulled at Mark's consciousness. "You saw the darkness. It feasts on despair. There is a way to end it, but—" It hesitated, as if the weight of its words threatened to crush it. "You must choose. What happens if we don't?" Ethan's voice was small, fear mingling with anger, the figure's eyes glimmered with a painful wisdom. "Then this house will claim all of you like it claimed me. But to break free, you must confront the shadows within. It requires a sacrifice." Just as the words settled, the ground trembled beneath them. The walls began to close in, as if the house itself was reacting to the revelation, threatening to crush them in its grasp. "Run!" Mark shouted, adrenaline pumping violently through him. They turned to flee, but the darkness surged, and the anguished cries of lost souls escalated into a cacophony. Mark felt her grip slipping as Lily struggled to keep up. "Daddy! Keep moving!" he yelled, the lantern sputtering as shadows slithered closer, eager to devour them. As they barreled toward the door, Mark's heart raced with a terrifying realization: if they didn't confront the darkness now, it would hunt them down. But could he sacrifice a part of himself to save the others? They burst through the doorway and turned a corner, desperate for escape, just as the shadows lashed out, a chorus of screams crackling through the air. "What do we do?" Sarah shouted, panic rising in her voice. "Face it!" Mark yelled back, resolution surging. "We face it together." But as he looked back, the figure lingered in the doorway, a reminder of the price of their freedom. With a final hiss, the shadows recoiled, drawing back as if sensing the challenge, yet, what awaited them beyond the threshold was another nightmare, a room filled with mirrors that reflected their deepest fears, and as the lantern flickered one last time, illuminating their faces twisted in terror, the floor beneath them heaved, threatening to plunge them into the unknown. "Mark!" Lily screamed, her small hand desperately squeezing his. Then came a chilling whisper that cut through the chaos: "The choice is yours, but choose wisely." What choice would claim them next? The mirrors shimmered ominously, reflecting fleeting images of terror-distorted faces, sudden movements, shadows lurking in every corner. They stood frozen, the weight of the house pressing in, their breath hitching in their throats as they absorbed the dread trapped in the glass. Do we go in?" Ethan whispered, the despair in his voice palpable. "Not without a plan." Sarah hissed, her gaze darting nervously. Each reflection pushed at their minds, showing not just what they feared but what they regretted. Mark felt his heart pounding, the allure of the mirrors almost overpowering. The whispers returned, echoing in the confined space. "Face what you bury. The truth will set you free," the voices murmured, slithering through the air around them, making the hair on the back of Mark's neck stand on end. "Why can't we just find another way?" Lily whined, her small hands trembling. Mark knelt down beside her, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "Listen to me, Lily. We need to be brave. We need to confront what's inside us, together." "Together," Ethan echoed, but uncertainty laced his words, the resolve on his face crumbling. "What if we can't? What if it takes us?" The reflections shifted, morphing into scenes of their past, faded memories twisted by the dark energies that saturated the house. Images of laughter turned to cries, smiles replaced by anger. Mark saw himself shouting at his family, the look of hurt in Lily's eyes piercing through him. "No. I can't," Mark gasped, stepping back as if physically struck. The pain twisted his insides. But then, he noticed something else in the mirror's surface, a sliver of hope glimmering faintly amidst the sorrow. "Mark!" Sarah shouted, snapping him from the hypnotic trance of the reflections. "We have to make a choice. Do we unleash it?" "Unleash what?" He looked wildly around, panic beginning to cloud his judgment. "The truth," she insisted. "If the mirrors show our fears, perhaps we can change them. If we confront what they show us, we might just break the curse." The notion spiraled in the air like smoke mixed with fear. It felt desperate, almost insane. But deep down, a flicker of understanding ignited. The house fed on fear, on despair. The shadows were parasites, thriving on their collective anguish. "Okay," Mark breathed out, gathering what was left of his courage. "Let us face them. Together." He took a step toward the nearest mirror, and as his foot hit the floor, the room seemed to react, a tremor rippling through the air. The whispers intensified, drowning out his thoughts. "Mark!" Lily cried out as a surge of darkness pulsed from the mirrors, forcing him to halt. Inside the glass, a demonic version of himself emerged, mocking and tormenting, a twisted reflection of the man he never wanted to become. "Are you ready to face what you've done?" The apparition cackled, its voice an echo of his own fears. "Mark!" Sarah yelled, a warning laced with desperation. The image leered closer, molten eyes glistening with malice. Could this be the real him, the darkness he kept hidden? "Get back!" Ethan shouted, pushing Lily behind him. His hands were balled into fists, defiance seeping through his fear as he stepped forward beside Mark. "We will face you together." The mirrors shuddered, as if disturbed by their combined defiance. The atmosphere grew charged, an electric tension that buzzed with urgency. Suddenly, the grounding beneath them felt as if it might break away. Would they plunge into an abyss of despair, or could they eclipse the shadows that haunted their pasts? "Now!" Mark yelled, the courage swelling inside him like a raging tide. They stepped closer to the mirror. The air thickened, a heavy silence enveloping the room. With a forceful push, they reached out, hands bridging the gap, determined to shatter the reflection that sought to ensnare them, but as their palms met the cool surface, a blinding flash erupted, engulfing them in blinding light. They gasped, tethered to the moment with an allure of madness and clarity, and then silence. The mirrors surrounding them quivered and cracked, a jagged spiderweb threatening to collapse, the whispers dwindling to soft, anxious murmurs. But the shadows still loomed, watching with gluttonous hunger. "I can feel it," Lily cried, eyes wide, alight. "I think we're breaking through. Hold on." Mark shouted, as the ground shuddered violently beneath them, but the whispers grew frantic. "You can't escape. You must pay the price." In that moment of chaos, he knew the truth. The sacrifice had not just been expected, it was a demand. As the light intensified, Mark's heart raced with a chilling question: what would they have to give up to escape? And just as he thought they might succeed, a darkness erupted from the depths of the mirror, a seething wave hungry for souls. "What is happening?" Ethan screamed, his voice drowned out by a distant wail, mimicking the cries of the damned. Would they be the next to be consumed? The shadows coiled tighter, and as Mark's vision blurred, one thought burned through the chaos: the choice had only just begun. Mark felt the pulse of the house, a thrumming darkness eager to disclose its secrets, but somehow, amidst the chaos, it became clear. They could break this curse. All of them. Together. He took a deep breath and shouted, "We confront the past. We won't be scared anymore." The shadows hissed angrily, contorting around them like wild snakes ready to strike, but Mark planted his feet firmly, allowing the adrenaline to surge. "Connect." He urged his family, reaching for Sarah first, then wrapping Ethan and Lily into a tight circle. As their hands intertwined, warmth spread through their bodies, cleaving them to one another. The shadows momentarily pulled back, as if uncertain. "Focus on the truth," Mark commanded, eyes scanning the mirrors, ready to face the darkness that waited there. Each member of the family closed their eyes, summoning up their fears, their regrets. One by one, with each shared thought, each moment of weakness or loss, they empowered their bond. Shadows dripped in agony against the walls, shrieking as they thrashed in torment. "Mommy, I didn't mean to make you sad," Ethan gasped, fighting through the burden of guilt he carried from an argument past. "But this first time I didn't mean it." "I should listen better," Sarah interjected, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I let fear cloud my choices." Lily whimpered, "I was scared, I tried to be brave." Her small voice wavered against the howls of denial swirling around them. Each admission cut through the mounting tension, felling the shadows bit by bit, and they began to spark in retreat. "Together!" Mark shouted again, holding their hands tighter as they gazed into the mirror's depths, reflections turning into tendrils of light that clawed at the darkness, sending it retreating. They were all intertwined, a fortress against despair. Suddenly, the shadows erupted into a torrential swirl, darker than the darkest night. A deafening scream sliced through all reason. "You will pay the price. You cannot defeat us." The twisted entity roared. "No!" Mark yelled back with fierce conviction. "We won to pay your price. We are stronger than you." This was different. They were not submitting, they were reclaiming their story. The lantern pulsed in alignment with their unity, its callback to distant echoes of hope, fueling their defiance. "I forgive you all." Mark shouted against the cacophony, and as his voice echoed, they all joined in. "I forgive you. I forgive you." Light flared from the lantern, bursting forth in a bright, illuminating glow that filled the room. The mirrors cracked wider, shattering the darkness that caged them. Each shard reflected their collective strength, forgiveness shining against the haunting cries of the shadows that began to dissipate, peeling away from them like old paint. The screams devolved into whispers, then silence as the abyss pulled back. "Is it over?" Lily whispered, staring into the remnants of the mirrors sparkling around them. "We did it!" Ethan shouted, bouncing with relief. Tears of joy mixed with those of despair as the darkness faded away, surrendering to the strength they forged together, but before they could catch their breath, an echoing voice broke the tranquil silence. "You will return, shadows never forget." It lingered in the air, an ominous reminder that battles may be won today, but the war could always return. Mark stepped back, breathing heavily, pushing the fear of the looming shadows behind him. Together, they had reclaimed their stories, their family, what mattered most. "And if it does, we'll be ready." They stood hand in hand, their hearts racing, yet stronger than the shadows. Emerging together, they ascended the staircase, eyes trained on the back door glowing with the warmth of a new dawn, knowing they had overcome something monstrous, that they could face anything as long as they did it together. Stepping outside, the sun broke through the dense clouds, bathing them in radiance. A new beginning awaited, and the Johnson family exhaled deep breaths of hope, vowing to never forget the strength they had found, nor to allow darkness to claim them again, because family would always be their light. Now, don't just sit there. You need to subscribe now to the channel for more exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to help feed the algorithm so we can keep bringing you these wild tales. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. Let's see what you think. Do not wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this conclusion. Show your support for the channel, be a part of the family.